7 of my tips for world building a culture. We went over the skeleton and then added muscles to it. So now we wrap it up in skin or fur, whatever is less disturbing to you. The point is, we now have a solid foundation to build something on. This step takes a lot less work than the others, but can help you build on what you already got with a bit of imaginary elbow grease. The first step is to establish 3 key principal traditions based on what you already got. You need a tradition around birth, a tradition around marriage, and a tradition around death. An example of a tradition around birth in a culture can range from dark and ominous to happy and joyful. Look at the culture you already have using the skeleton and the muscle and decide what will these people think of birth. Marriage is where you can go absolutely anywhere with. You don't even need to call it marriage. A good example is by the creator at Wolfaboo and how his wolves do a fang fast. I highly recommend you check out his page. I would tag him, but every time I try to, I can't. Just look up Wolves of Avalon. It's very interesting. Especially if you're writing a story about talking animals and don't want to constantly get bombarded with warrior cats stuff as the default. Death is where you can actually be very creative as well. In my work in progress, Labrie the Sabers take their dead and place them in the tar pits to prevent other animals from eating them, and so that they will always be surrounded by prey. Which is why the tar pits are a sacred site and no one Labrie can claim them as a part of their territory. Just to be clear, when I put Labrie, it's supposed to say La Brea, as in the Labrie tar pits in California, where the largest collection of saber and direwolf bones are. Go check it out, it's very interesting, and they have the most interactive museum. And the groups of saber-toothed cats in my work in progress Labrie are called Labrias, like how a group of wolves is called a pack. As a reference, anyways, once you have a solid idea of how your culture handles birth, marriage, and death, you're going to find a lot of aspects of your culture come naturally. And it gets really easy to really get into the nitty-gritty. I recommend doing this after you have a strong foundation like the skeleton and muscles we have built. Because whenever I start off with the traditions around birth, marriage, and death, my cultures end up centering around those 3 things. And I end up limiting myself in ways that really kill the whole process. Once you get those 3 things down, the next thing I tackle is making at the bare minimum to historical figures. These could be warriors, inventors, royalty, fashion designers, athletes. You just need, at the bare minimum, to individuals that shaped your culture enough that they are remembered in present day for better or worse. This can greatly help you to expand on more aspects of your culture. For now, keep it simple. Name a rough idea of when they existed, what they did to be remembered. You can come back and change it as needed, or add on to it. This brings us to the next part of this process. Make a rough timeline. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to exist. I recommend taking chunks of a minimum of a couple of decades to barely a few thousand years and assigning names to these chunks of your cultures. History to give you an idea of how long this culture has existed. It will come in handy when refining your culture's history and in exploring the history of your world as a whole. It will come in handy in referencing the past in your writing. You can look at real-world history as a good example of how this could work or make it up as you see fit. Just keep it simple. A simple list with a rough summary of this chunk of years and how many years it lasted for. Simple. And now for the part that I highly suggest you put a lot of thought into. Because no matter where in the world you go, this one thing pops up in different ways, and it's best you sit down and wrestle with it. Now, while your history is vague, slavery, you want to know what your people think of slavery in its current day, and what it thought about it in its history? In my 2 work-in-progresses, Labrie and Hookah Smiths of old, slavery doesn't exist. Not in the traditional sense, at least. In Labrie, the saber-toothed cats are, well, saber-toothed cats. They don't really have slavery, but in a sense, depending on how you look at it, they are technically slaves to their laws. In Hookah's myths of old, the closest thing you will find to a slave is a mooncat. The system of mooncats varies depending on the clan. In the main character's clan, the clan of Ritum, mooncats are essentially slaves with luxuries. They cannot leave the palace without permission. They cannot see their family without permission. They cannot start nor end their days until they report to a member of the royal family. And they have lists of tasks depending on their powers that they must complete. They must always be presentable, quiet. Emotions are typically reserved for private moments or people that you're close to. Finding a mate as a mooncats is not about love in Ritoon. It's strategic, not about you at all. It's about the benefits your child could have depending on your partner. And this starts young. Mooncats typically get their powers when they are between the ages of 5 and 7. Once you get your powers as a moon cat, you're taken from your family in a ceremony and raised in the palace to be obedient and quiet. You will see your family regularly so long as you do as told. If not, you lose a visit. This practice is framed as an honor and glory. As a child, you learn to keep any grievances about it to yourself. Because all the adults act shocked when you say you don't like it, and even outside the palace, your family is affected. The main character Shark has an older sister who is a mooncat, and it affects his life as he is betrothed to a girl named Sea Mist, because her family has a long history of producing mooncats. And given his sister is one, it's believed his children will be mooncats if paired with the right girl. And he hates it, but every single person around him acts as if he's not thinking clearly. Every last person. And the system is more corrupt than just that, but that would spoil it. An example of what would be considered actual slavery is in my work in progress, Feathered Friends. This would be the Gwild, a group of people who serve the Hypergriff Corps and their military academy. Each Gwild is assigned a student whose debt they pay off via labor. They have less rights than the average citizen and are in every sense slaves. In this history, it started in the time of clans, and since the Gwild was started, there has been 2 failed Gwild rebellions and multiple prophecies claiming that the Gwild will one day be freed. Slavery exists in my work in progress, Twisted Wonderland retelling, but it's only in a few countries, and it's not a very common practice. In my work in progress, My Little Pony retelling, they don't have slavery, as it was a practice of the creatures known simply as the Dark Ones. In my work in progress, Substance, the main country did have slavery in its history, but how you became a slave depended heavily on the era. In modern day, there aren't slaves, and the laws involving the rights of slaves have been transferred to the closest thing, which are those sentenced to servitude for a period of time. And with that, that's everything you need to cover up the muscles of your culture. Next, we will be putting a heart in this culture. Catherine Aud.